Hello and welcome. One of the most resilient ecosystems aren't the lush forests we celebrate mostly, but the harsh, rocky landscapes we overlook. Today's conversation takes us into the Deccan Inselbergs, ancient, isolated rock outcrops that look barren at first glance, but quietly sustain unique biodiversity and act as natural buffers against climate stress. Joining us today is an engineer turned ornithologist who transferred from biotechnology at NIT Raipur and IIT Kharagpur to a PhD at CSIR-CCNB Hyderabad, where he studied the endangered yellow-throated bulbul. He's now a scientist at the Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun, working on bird ecology, ringing, and population studies. Ashish Shah, thank you so much for joining on this.
Thank you, Ananya. Thank you for the warm invitation, and I'm happy to be here.
All right, I'll not take more time of yours and pass you the baton. Please go ahead.
Okay, sure. So, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Hindustan Times, for having me here. It's a wonderful opportunity, and yeah, I look forward to it. So, can we have the presentation? Yes, so thank you for everybody who is here. The work that I'm going to show here and the habitat that I'm going to talk about, I have spent at least 5, 6 years in this habitat during my PhD days from 2014 till 2020. So a lot of it is from my PhD work as well as some of the work that I intend to do there. Now, yes, our beautiful country, and we all know how biodiverse it is. Now, these are some of the prominent landscapes that we know of. For instance, the snow-peaked Himalayas in the Kashmir, or be it the forests of the Western Ghats in Kerala, or be it the deserts of Rajasthan, or the dry deciduous forest, which is the most abundant kind of forest type. Similarly, the Brahmaputra and Ganga floodplains are vast beaches and, of course, the islands, Andaman and Lakshadweep. Now, these are the most common landscapes and the wilderness areas that we know of. But I'm going to talk about wilderness that often gets neglected, and they are called Inselbergs. Now, why Inselbergs? So this gentleman, Dr. Wilhelm Conrad, he was a German geologist who was working back then in the colonial Africa, East Africa, and he came across these structures. So if you can see on the screen, these are some looks like a small isolated hillock. They just abruptly come out of earth and surrounded by vast plains. So he needed a terminology for them. So these are not mountains. So he called them Inselberg. Insel meaning isolated, and berg means landscape or landmass, such as iceberg. So these are Inselbergs, and these Inselbergs are not just in Africa, they're everywhere. In fact, some of the most famous and prominent Inselbergs would be the flat top mountains of Venezuela. Then you have these giant, massive single rock in Australia. Then we have another similar roundish and a flat top Inselberg in Sri Lanka. And of course, the ones we have in Karnataka, India. Now they are distributed across the world. So very recently, you can see this is a 2024 publication where some scientists came together to list out all such possible Inselbergs across the world, and we can see they're found everywhere from very temperate regions such as Alaska and higher up in the Nordic countries to very southern like South Africa and Australia. They're also there in rainforests such as Amazons of Brazil or Congo, and they're also there in dry regions somewhere around Sub-Sahara. In our country, if you can see in the map, all the Inselbergs that have been named or pointed out are from the Deccan region. And that's why the title of the study, Deccan Inselberg. But that does not mean that these Inselbergs or these isolated mountains, isolated systems are only in southern India. Uh, for instance, this is a topographic map of the state of Bihar. So you can see the northernmost point, which is Valmiki Tiger Reserve, that's part of the Himalayan Shivaliks. The bottom portion, this is part of what we call as Chota Nagpur Plateau. So this joins Jharkhand region. But then we have this hill called Rajgir Hills. Now, can this be an Inselberg? Yes, it can be. So there are three. So the same researchers who came up with that publication on the Inselbergs across the world gave a definition of what is an Inselberg, and they listed three important criteria. First, it must be old. How old? At least 50 million years. So all of these Inselbergs are pretty old systems, unlike Himalayas, which are a very new mountain range. Inselbergs are pretty old. Second, they have to be isolated from any mountain range nearby. And third, they have to be ecologically distinct from the surrounding regions. So Rajgir Hill seems to be fitting the definition, but they are most prominent. These landscapes are a very prominent feature in the southern region of our country. And if you have ever traveled in train or buses in these areas, you cannot miss this sort of landscape. Uh, and in southern India, and in fact in our country, they are known by various different names. Inselbergs is obviously not so common. All of these rocks that you see are rich in granite. They are granitic in nature, so they are called as granitic hillocks. Some call them rolling hills. Some call them part of Eastern Ghats, right? So these are all the different names, but I like to call them Inselberg. And there is very limited research on this sort of landscape. And that's what interested me to take up a study of this particular region. Now, the obvious question would be, how do they arise? How do they come into being? Now, I'm not a geologist, so I would not be able to explain in a lot of detail. But in short, think of it this way, like how you make atta for making a chapati, right? You take, the wheat grain, the flour, and then you like knead it, like ab hum usse goothte hain. So we bring in a layer and then we crush it back, then we bring another layer and we put it back again, and this way we mix it. This is what has happened to the rock of earth over the millions of years. Several times rocks have gone within the earth crust, have come out, have gone back, and different kinds of rock types have got mixed. Now, in our school, if you remember, we all have studied that there are three different kinds of rock. First is the sedimentary rock. So when the rivers, they bring sediments, and over time it accumulates and it becomes pretty solid mass. So sedimentary rock. So sedimentary rocks are the most, what should I say, erodible. They're very soft in nature. So minimal amount of rain and air can erode them over time. Same sedimentary rock, when gets crushed and gets beneath, probably say 5-10 kilometer inside the earth crust, because of the intense temperature and pressure, they become what we call as metamorphic rock. And then the third kind is igneous rock, the molten lava that comes out of earth. It solidifies and it becomes igneous rock. Now, all these three kind of rocks can coexist. As I said, as I gave the analogy of making the atta. So, because of this differential erosion of different rock types, some of the rocks, such as sedimentary rocks or those elements, get washed away, leaving behind these Inselbergs. And that leads to these sort of beautiful structures. For instance, this Krishna's butterball in Mahabalipuram, and this particular picture, which looks like a giant granitic ball which is stuck in between a few pillars of rock, which was in Horsle Hills, Andhra Pradesh. Now, if you look at this landscape, so this is Handigundi Betta. From Betta in Kannada means hill or hillock. So this is Handigundi hillock in Karnataka. And if you can notice, it has got some bamboo along the edges in the foothills. Now, bamboo is a vegetation that grows otherwise in moist areas. But if you look at the landscape, this does not look like moist. But that's the thing. That's what is so unique about Inselbergs, that they have such mesic patches or regions or areas of moisture within them, even in a dry landscape. So, for instance, if you look into this picture on your left on this screen, there's a small tree that's growing out of that rock crevices. So that's the thing. There is no soil, and the temperatures can go pretty high, almost 50 degrees Celsius. These are bare rock. They can get so hot. So they are very much like a desert ecosystem with no moisture and bare minimum soil with very high temperature. But then within these rock crevices, they hold moisture. And so they also act as, what should I say, like small valleys within the, between the mountains, something of that sort. And that's the reason you can have some wet forest, wet land dependent species such as bamboos in this landscape. Now, these Inselbergs that particularly we have in our country are not well studied. Now, one of the reasons could be that they don't have any charismatic megafauna such as tigers. Tigers won't never be found there. They barely have elephants, certainly no rhinoceros. There are no major rivers that come out of these giant hillocks, so no crocodile or mahshir as such, mahshir fishes. But then they are very important in terms of smaller life forms such as these plants and insects. So if you can see, this is one of the pictures from Horsley Hills in Andhra Pradesh. And right under a rock, on the rock, you can see all these different kinds of lichen, different species of lichen that grows there. These are all different types of ferns and monocot plants that somehow survive in that region despite having no soil and very high temperature. Now there are no rivers as I said, but then underground water somehow just seeps through these rock structures. So here you can see there is some moisture. It's just the underwater aquifers that has somehow come up on the surface. And there are these two different ficus. So ficuses are like banyan and peepal tree, right? They are keystone species. So there are these two different ficus species which are growing on the bare rock. And then there is this particular plant that you can see. It's again going on growing on the bare rock. It looks dead, but trust me, it's not. Just wait for the next monsoon with the bare minimum water available. It would still have, it'll flush out the green leaves. And yeah, it'll hold on to that moisture till it's available. And then it'll again go into arrested growth. And this is a carnivorous plant. Yes, plants can be meat eater, not meat eaters, but yeah, they can be carnivorous. So this is a plant called sundew, because see, they don't have much soil, and even the whatever little soil they have, they don't have a lot of organic content. They don't have a lot of nutrients. So for plants to grow in such resource restricted environment, they sometimes turn carnivorous. So this is the landscape where you can also find some carnivorous plants. So these landscapes are not well studied from the perspective of large mammals, but then they are well studied in terms of such smaller plants and life forms. Now, there are different kinds of microhabitat. Now, what is a microhabitat? So, when I say desert, rainforest, riverine ecosystem, these are all habitats. But within a given habitat, they can be microhabitat. For instance, there are these water pools. So, these water pools do not remain available year round. So, they are the cavities or gaps within the hillock system within the Inselbergs, and every time whenever there is like 2 3 4 months of monsoon, they'll get filled up, and immediately the entire area will come to life. It looks like a desert just before the monsoon, and right after the monsoon for 4 months there'll be an amazing frenzy among all the frogs and the toads and the insects, dragonflies, all the water lilies and the water dependent plants to immediately start to, reproduce and finish their life cycle before the water dries out. Similarly, uh, the rock sheets that you see here hold on to moisture and sometimes dew, and they provide a refuge, a microclimate to various different kinds of insects. Now, these landscapes are not very useful at present to human beings. Why? Because they don't have soil, so you don't do a lot of agriculture there. They just suddenly abruptly rise out of earth, so they look more like a hindrance that you just can't, make like straight roads through them. But for ancient humans, yeah, they were pretty important. So there is this beautiful abandoned temple, rock temple that I found in Devarayan Durga, and these are called dolmens. So dolmens are pretty old. Some say up to like 2000 to 3000 years old. And these dolmen sort of structure have been reported across the world. So some say that ancient humans who lived in this landscape, they used them as a burial places or for some religious purposes. So yes, I have seen such dolmens in Karnataka, in Andhra Pradesh, uh, not in Tamil Nadu, but I'm pretty sure they must be there. But uh, as I said, that these ecosystems are not seen as very useful by the humans, but and hence they are under a lot of threat. Now, what are the key threats? Obviously, granite. India is leading exporter of granite in the world, and these rocks are pure granite. Granite is a metamorphic rock, which means it's pretty hard. So if you have to build a road or if you have to build a house or as any structure, you would need granite for your tiling. You don't even realize the pavements that you walk onto could be millions of years old. Some of them could be actually older than Earth. Yes, geology can be crazy. Some of these rocks could be older than Earth. So what happens when you clear up these rocks? The thing is that these rock crevices hold on to moisture, which support ficuses, which are a keystone species. So once you eliminate them, you're eliminating the entire ecosystem. And these are pretty important. We'll see the species which are dependent on these structures. For instance, they are very important nesting sites for vultures. They are very important nesting sites for eagle owls. And also, when you open up these hillocks for granite extraction, you're making it possible for invasive species such as lantana to get into these habitat, which is not a good thing. Here you can see the soil, which is whatever little soil that these Inselbergs have been dug out for brick construction. Now, we do not realize that soil as well as granite are both non-renewable. We are no longer making any more new soil. We are also not making a new granite. So whatever is there, that's it. If we lose it, probably it'll gone. So, what happens from this landscape when you remove all the soil, when you remove all these vegetation, then these bare rocks, and obviously it doesn't take much time to even get these bare rocks cut and used as a pavement, and then complete loss of this entire ecosystem. But not everything is bad. Some work has also been done for conservation. Now, as I said, these structures, these Inselbergs, are pretty important for some of the critically endangered species such as vultures, and they're also an important nesting sites for eagle owls. So here we have Ram Devra Betta Vulture Sanctuary, which is India's first vulture sanctuary where we have vultures breeding in there. So that's Inselberg, that is a protected area. The next, we have pictures from what is Rachakonda Fort. So Konda in Telugu means hill or hillock. So this is Rachakonda Fort, and archaeological site, but currently abandoned, not under the control of ASI, so people can just walk through it. And I have found five different species of bats roosting there in one of these forts, which was built on these Inselbergs. Similarly, 2 to 3 years ago in Tamil Nadu, there is this Inselberg called Aritapatti, which is also a historical site. So that was declared as a as a heritage monument. Now, these Inselbergs are pretty small. They are barely few hectares in, they're not even like a square kilometer. So the traditional methods of having a wildlife sanctuary or a national park may not work for them because they also don't have things like tigers and leopards or elephants. So the forest department or the policy makers may not be very keen on declaring them a protected area as such. But then there are other things that can be done. For instance, in UNESCO, they have this concept of geopark. So what if people, the way they go for bird watching, they could go for, geology watching or a rock walk. So yes, such rock walks can be organized in this sort of landscape, and there is one such organization which does a pretty similar thing. It's called Society for to Save the Rocks. It's based in Hyderabad. So this is their logo. They often, like monthly, they organize such walks in the last remaining rocky habitats of Hyderabad. So a lot of Hyderabad was in fact covered with this Inselbergs, and there are these regions called Jubilee Hills. Right now, it's where all the rich and affluent people live, and it's where all the Telugu film actors live. But if you go there, there is no longer a hill, but still we call it Jubilee Hills, Banjara Hills, because once upon a time, if we go back 100 years, there were hills in that region, but now they have been cleared up and they all have been turned into urban centers. So it's important for us to protect these landscapes. Now, in this logo, you see a reptile. Now, what is this? This is what we call as peninsular rock agama. It's a very beautiful lizard that's found only in southern India, and it's very strongly tied to this habitat. So, only in this sort of rocky structures that you will find a peninsular rock agama. So peninsular rock agama is not the only fauna which is dependent on this habitat. There is another species called yellow-throated bulbul. Now, I keep mentioning again and again that there are no megafauna which are endemic or very critically dependent on this sort of landscape. Yes, sloth bears are found, and yes, we have Hampi, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and then we have Daroji Bear Sanctuary, and there are some other couple of bear sanctuaries in Karnataka. So, other than sloth bear, we don't have a lot of mammals strongly tied to this landscape, but among birds, we have this one bird called yellow-throated bulbul. You can see it on your screen right here at the footsteps of the temple. So this picture was taken in a temple called Uma Maheshwaram. This is right at the beginning of Amrabad Tiger Reserve in Telangana, Mahbubnagar district. Now, the thing is, high up in these hillocks, where the habitat is very much like a desert, okay, it's pretty high temperature, no soil, bare minimum vegetation, and then suddenly out of nowhere there is a small water pool because of the water that trickles through uh, uh, the the rock crevices, and then a lot of green vegetation that grows around it. So when our ancestors may have seen this thing, they would have felt a sense of divinity, and they would have felt the need to protect these areas, so they may have turned them into temples. But unfortunately, that's what has come to bite us, because now these temples have become more like a tourism zone. So there were at least 200 to 300 steps which people had to walk to come to this Uma Maheshwaran temple. And this was like probably 20, 30 years ago. And now you have like a two-lane road that goes directly to the temple. So you can drive from Hyderabad on your SUV on weekends, come to the temple. You can have momos and whatever you want, and you can go back, have darshan, and go back. So the thing is that these temples and the reason for which they existed in such places uh, was to protect these delicate ecosystem, and we need to ensure that thing. Now, coming back to this bulbul, yellow-throated bulbul, this is found only in southern India, and this is found only in such hillocks. And all these hillocks, they have such temples. So during my PhD days, I did a lot of tirth darshan, like a lot of such tirth visits that I had to do to see this bulbul. So, unlike the other bulbuls that are found in our country, the commonest one would be red vented bulbul. If you're from Bangalore or southern India, probably red whiskered bulbul and white broad bulbul would be equally common. In Gujarat and Rajasthan area, white eared bulbul would be very common. But these bulbuls, the speciality of them is that you would never find in them in your backyard. You'll always find them in such rocky structures, in such hillocks. They are always found in a pair. So they don't form a huge flock like 10, 15 individuals. And in a given area, they may not be more than like 10 pairs as such. So they are found in very low densities. They make this open cup-shaped nest, and one of the nests that I had found was placed inside a rock crevices, and they lay 2 to 3 eggs. There's this picture of a juvenile yellow-throated bulbul that has just fledged out of nest. So they grow out of nest in like 10 to 12 days. They mostly eat fruits and berries, and these fruits and berries are the one that grow in that landscape. So they also help in dispersing the seeds in that landscape. So when uh, I was working with these birds and I would catch them, I would put color bands and some metal bands on their rings for identification. They would defecate, and I would collect all those seeds which they had defecated, and I tried to grow them. So when I went back to my institute in CCMB Hyderabad, I tried growing these seeds, and I could not germinate a single of them, because all of these seeds were the native species that grow specifically in that region. And I'm not a botanist, so didn't have much idea. I thought growing seeds should be just like you throw them in soil and they would germinate, but that was not the thing. So that's the thing. This habitat is so unique. Even the plants that they grow there require very specific kind of conditions, moisture and soil nutrient level, since they are used to grow in such limited soil and nutrient conditions. When you grow them, when you try to grow them under a lot of moisture and a lot of nutrient rich soil, probably they'll not germinate. So this is why it is so important to study this bird and this landscape. Now, unlike, so similar to the other ecosystem, for instance, in our forest, in our dry deciduous forest, tigers are a charismatic species. For River Ganga, it would be Ganga River dolphin. For Thar Desert, it would be our Great Indian bustard, a charismatic species. For our Himalayas, it could be our snow leopard. Similarly, one flagship species that we can have for this landscape is yellow-throated bulbul, because it is so strongly tied to this habitat. And protecting yellow-throated bulbul would require us to protect the habitat. Now, this is the habitat that it's found, and all the black marks that you see here are the are the water seepages over time onto these rocks, and you can see some trees growing out of these rock crevices. Now, during my study, I also asked, why is this bird so strongly tied to this habitat? So, for instance, if you have traveled from Coimbatore to Valparai, so there is this thing called Coimbatore Valparai or Polachi Valparai road, which is like a hairpin bend. So, it goes like zigzag, 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 and it gently rises up in the elevation. So the foothills, and this is, by the way, in the Western Ghats. So the Western Ghat roads, right? So In the foothills, it's all very dry forest, and as you drive up, you can feel the change in the weather because you're entering more into the Western Ghats, so it starts to get cold, and only between a very specific, like around third to ninth hairpin bends, that is only third to ninth road that you would find yellow-throated bulbul. You would not find them beyond that, where it gets a lot more moisture and a lot more humid. So such is the very specific requirement for this bulbul. So I asked why. Why is this bird found in such very specific landscape? So what I found was that this bird does not prefer, despite it being found in southern India where it can get really hot in summers, this bird prefers to be around the areas where the temperature does not go beyond 25 to 30 degrees Celsius, not just in summers but also in winters. Also, it does not prefer high rainfall areas, so it avoids clearly very moist and highly humid areas. So what are those areas, what are those locations where the temperature remains pretty much same year round, where the moisture level remains same year round? And the answer is this: rocky structures. So they may look like barren, they may look like desert, they may look like of no use. So it's a very lucrative idea to blast them and sell off granite and make a lot of money, but then they are extremely critical for species such as yellow-throated bulbul. Now, yellow-throated bulbul is not the only species that is found over there. Here in this particular slide, I have put up a picture of few species which are strongly tied to this landscape. This picture is from the Asia's largest monolith. Monolith means single piece of rock. So this is Savanadurga, which is in Bangalore. Just a few hours drive from Bangalore. This is a single piece of rock, and among the species that you can find here are slender lorises, golden geckos. A lot of people don't know that India also has tarantula species, and this is Guti tarantula, also called sapphire or blue sapphire tarantula, pretty beautiful, which is found in such landscapes. Then we have endemic toads and cycasses. Now, this is not a very exhaustive list of species which are tied to this landscape. There are at least, I would say, 100 such species which are strongly tied in this landscape and they're not found elsewhere. And if we want to protect these landscapes and for these species, we have to value these ecosystems. No amount of wildlife sanctuaries and protected areas in Western Ghats or in the Himalayas or in the Andamans will protect this species. These Inselbergs are important in their own way, in their own regards. And yes, so thank you. And if you have questions, I'm more than happy to take.
Dr. Ashish Jha, thank you so much for that. It was very, very informative. And top of my head, I'm wondering like if it's that important to our biodiversity, to our planet, why do you think they've remained so overlooked in conservation priorities?
Very good question, Ananya. And this was exactly what Dr. Salim Ali, the famous birdman of India, had also noted, that these are very neglected ecosystem, neglected habitat. Why? First, because they don't have a lot of biodiversity. Now, if you go to Western Ghats, if you spend like 20 minutes anywhere in the Western Ghats, you can spot at least 50 different species of birds. But then the same 1 hour in one of these Inselbergs, you would be able to spot probably 20, 25 species. So they are not very biodiverse. So we think high biodiversity is certainly good, but they have unique biodiversity. That's what I want to say. And also, they don't have tigers and elephants. So our India's conservation story is very tiger centric, which is excellent, which is good. Tigers are a keystone species. They are an umbrella species, but there are a lot of species which often gets neglected. For instance, fungi and mushroom, right? Different kinds of ferns, different kinds of smaller bryophytes in terms of plants, different species of cockroaches. How many people know that there are actually multiple kinds of cockroaches, and some of the cockroaches could be endemic to these habitats? So, be it different insects, be it different plant forms, they are endemic to the system, and often they are not studied. So that's the reason this landscape is often neglected, and also they are pretty small. As I said, they barely go beyond like a square kilometer in overall area.
That's very interesting. Also, on a personal note, your journey from engineering to studying the rocky ecosystem is quite unconventional. What drew you to this shift?
So thing is, I was a good student in the sense in terms of academics. And what happens in this country, I mean, pretty much similar elsewhere. If you're good in studies, the only options for you are like either engineering or medical. So these were the options available to me, and I availed them. Back then, I didn't even know that there is something called ecology or what is wildlife and how do people make career in this. Though I knew that I have a longing for this, I liked it. I spent my childhood watching Discovery and National Geographic more than Cartoon Network, but I just didn't know how, like, what is this called, how to approach this. Can you make a career out of it? I had never met an ecologist in my life, and smartphones were not a thing. Internet was not so easily accessible. I wasn't a tech CV either. So I did my BTech in biotechnology. I knew that I am not built for things like uh, uh, electrical or mechanical engineering. I was more into biology or life forms. So I went into biotechnology. That's where I did my BTech, then biotechnology MTech, and this was year 2012, sorry, 2014. And by that time, I had gotten an idea of what is wildlife, which are the institutes in the country which offer a degree on wildlife. So once I cleared my CSIR exam, which allowed me to do PhD anywhere in the country, I applied to only those places which had a PhD program in wildlife. So I immediately, packed my bags and jumped to CCMB Hyderabad for doing my PhD on birds.
That's great, Dr. Jha. Thank you so much. And I hope you keep inspiring not just yourself, but others who can take these unconventional career options. And hopefully, then Inselbergs could be as glamorous as other landscapes across the world. All right, on that note, let's wrap up. Dr. Jha, it's been a
Yes.
pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Ananya. It was a pleasure speaking to you.